All right, Ray, we have dealership transactions expected to remain elevated in 2025. And what this means is that there are going to be a lot of dealerships that actually change hands. And what that would lead me to believe is that there are a lot of dealers, principals that want to get out of it. And then usually when we have rough times, no matter what the market is, you have a lot of mergers and acquisitions. And this is what we're seeing right here, where you have a lot of the big players are absorbing a lot of the small players because they have to get out. Floor plans, everything costs way more right now, and it makes it more difficult for these mom and pop dealerships to operate. And I think we're going to see this going through the rest of this year, probably really in a big way next year, because we have all these dealerships where their inventory is just so high that they can't sustain what they're doing right now.
I think that profitable dealerships will be sought after by other groups. Those that are struggling, ain't nobody looking to buy them right away. If you have proven over the course of time that as a dealer principal you understand how to operate your business so that it has a long-term growth potential, and you have shown that over the course of time, then there are other groups that would come in and look at it and go, we think we could take that store to the next level because we have processes in place that would allow us to do that. My favorite word, synergies between our existing stores and any new stores that we might buy. And so, stores that have been profitable or have shown growth over the last few years, those stores could and likely would be bought up. The stores that have struggled, there would be some dealers that would look at those and go, they're struggling because they're run so poorly that if we buy them and we just institute some policies and procedures, we could see growth. But I think a lot, when you look at that, depends on what the hell the future holds, as far as if we're going to see tariffs, how tariffs could manifest themselves in the price increases and things of that nature. But assuming that things, even though they don't look like they're going to stay the same, let's assume for a second that they do, that a lot of this is just talk and it never comes to be, then yeah, I think you're still going to see a lot of dealership groups get bought and sold. Take for instance, Herb Chambers in New England, in the Boston area. Just Asbury Automotive is buying them for, are you sitting down? $1.34 billion. Now, what does that indicate to you, other than the fact that Asbury says we can buy all those stores for $1.34 billion and we're still going to make money? That's a staggering sum of money.
Yeah, I got a question for you. So we know that like Stellantis dealerships. I mean, you've had Zach get text messages from dealer principals saying that you couldn't give me a Stellantis dealership right now because they know that they're going to end up losing more money on that thing, even if they got into it for no money at all. My question to you is, as we see Stellantis continue to get hammered, continue to struggle, their dealerships continue to struggle, do you think that makes it to where more of the Stellantis dealerships change hands? I almost wonder, there's a supply and demand kind of aspect here where there's no demand, but you're going to have an increase of supply of a lot of dealer principals that want to get out of these Stellantis dealerships. What do you think will happen to the numbers that are at least that change hands? Do you think that is a net positive? Not net positive, but do you think there are more Stellantis dealerships that change hands or fewer because of all this?
I think more. I mean, more? I said this 18 months ago. If I was the dealer principal of a Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram store, I'd have that son of a gun on the market, looking for bids, getting somebody to try and buy it. There's
probably a year and a half ago.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Because you could have read the writing on the wall a year and a half ago. I mean, we
yeah.
all saw it. We saw it in real time. It didn't happen in slow motion. We saw all those inventories building up. We saw dealers turning down allocations. So you could see it happening. We saw that Stellantis wasn't supporting the product. So if you owned a Stellantis branded store, why wouldn't you want to get rid of it? I mean, there, there's only so much brain damage you're willing to put up with in order to maintain a dealership, and at a certain point, the brain damage uh, just gets so burdensome that you need to get out. Let somebody else go through it. Now, are there dealers out there that could look at Stellantis dealerships and go, we think we can turn it around? Absolutely, there are. Um, will they have the processes in place? Will they have the procedures that they can implement? Do they have the staff that they could utilize to train the existing staff that's there the way that they now want to conduct business? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of dealers that have made that bet and they've won. There's also a lot of dealers that have made that bet and they've lost. Um, I joke that typically if a dealership gets sold, the dealer buying it looks at it and says, this business hasn't been run properly. If we take it over, we can probably increase sales 10 to 15% instantly, just because we know how to operate a dealership better. And I've joked that there were times that I felt like I've worked for owners who said when they bought a dealership, I know the dealership's been struggling. We can show them how they can struggle even more. Uh, I've been convinced of that because I've watched how they didn't improve things once they bought them. In many cases, they made the situations worse, and sales actually stagnated even further. So it all depends on the processes and procedures that the new dealer can put into place. Because I have worked for groups that have had multiple dealerships, and yet each of those dealerships seem to have operated independently. There wasn't any corporate guidelines as to how each dealership should do things. At one store, they might do it one way. At another store, they could do it a different way. And it's like, well, why isn't it just done one way at all the stores? So if the ownership group isn't on top of how each store operates, then it's not going to be successful. The ones that are successful when they buy have all those processes in place, and they're shared by every one of the stores. Um, so I think it'll be an interesting year to where we can see a lot of. I think that the large publics are going to be active, trying to buy up whatever smaller dealer groups there are that are profitable that they can add to their portfolios.
So on the inverse side of that, we talked about Stellantis. You think there's more of those dealerships that are
Yeah.
going to change
Oh,
hands. Toyota still a money printer at
oh
this
my
point.
God, absolutely.
Yeah, and probably going to be, even if we have a rough time in the car market, which that's what we believe is going to be over the next 2 years.
Yes.
Toyota still, in my estimation, still going to be just fine. Do you think that with that there's more dealerships that are just going to stay in place because they're making so much money, or do you think that there'll be more transactions with even Toyota also?
Well, it depends. It depends how long ownership has been in place at a particular store. If somebody started a Toyota store 40 years ago, and I know there's a lot of owners in the car business who find out that just because they have a child doesn't mean the child has the same interest or the same drive that they did when it came to running their business. So I've seen many dealerships where they have brought their children in to run it. That was their first major mistake, because
Yeah.
the children that in many cases that they bring in to run it have no desire. other than how much you paying me. You're going to pay me well, aren't you? So you those older dealers that have been doing it for 35, 40 years, whose children have already indicated that they have no interest in carrying on the family business, those type of dealerships, I would think, as long as they're still bringing big money, if you've been doing this for 35 or 40 years, it's time to start thinking about your exit strategy, especially if your kids aren't interested in doing it. Hit the subscribe button and that like button, because nothing says we love you quite like liking us.
I would think too, with a lot of these dealer principals that have done it for a long time. I mean, you were in the business for 30 years.
40 some.
40 years. Oh my goodness, you're old. Okay. No, but going from I mean, what, 30 years ago up until now, so much has changed as far as regulations and everything. Dealers that have experienced that time earlier, when it was a lot easier to run a business, when it was a lot easier to make money, it was, cars were everywhere. You could make money on the front end, you could make money on the back end, you could make money all over the place, you could make money in service. They can still do that to that extent, but it seems like there's a lot more hurdles now for a dealership to operate in. Just even me as a small used car dealer over the last 14 years, things 10 years ago were 100% easier to run than they are today. It seems like a lot of these owners that have experienced that change, they might just be tired.
Oh, I guarantee it. Absolutely. I mean, dealerships have had to become much more efficient than they were in the past. In the past, hell, when I said it was like the wild, wild west, for goodness sake. If everybody lied, cheated, and stole, it seemed. The customers, the salespeople, the owners. It was just, I mean, there were people that had no compunction about selling a vehicle with rolled back miles. Dealerships were rolling back odometers. It was an ugly, ugly time. And so more rules and regulations came into effect. And so you had to become a more efficient operator. And at a certain point, it gets tiresome. It just does. I mean, I operated in retail automotive for 42 or 43 years. To suggest that I might have been just a tad bit brain dead at the end would probably be an understatement. I mean, there's only so much that you can take doing that. And so yes, there's owners out there that are hands-on owners. I mean, I worked for a guy, my God, I used to get emails from him, and the timestamp on the email might have been 4:30 in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, he was up checking deals at that hour. That takes a toll on you. And so at a certain point you just go, it's enough. It's enough. Let's figure out how we can sell it. We can divvy up the money. The kids that didn't want to work can get a little bit of money. They'll be happy. So yeah, I think you look at dealerships that have been in place for a long time, that have been owned by the same family for a long time. And I think you can look at those dealerships and say to yourselves, they're ripe to be bought. How long do you want to do? I mean, you've been doing it for 14 years. Can you see doing this for another 30?
That's funny. Right on time, my wife said, I understand getting burned out over these last several years. It's not an easy road, especially if you want to do the right thing. And with saying that, I have a used car dealership that is for sale. If anyone would like to give me lots and lots of money for it, they can have the freaking thing. But
no, I mean, in all seriousness.
No, I won't be doing this 20. There's no way in 20 years from now I'll be doing this.
People have, I know the vast majority of people out there look down at those of us who have spent any time in retail automotive. that every last one of us was a no good son of a gun. You couldn't be trusted. And for those of us who tried to play by different rules, fairness and transparency, um, that took a toll. Because the public just assume. I mean, I used to say to salespeople, potential salespeople, who came in and applied for a job, how are you going to feel when the person across from you who's potentially buying a car is looking at you and thinking you are nothing more than the scum of the earth simply because what it is you have chosen to do, not because of who it is that you actually are? Because that's the way car people are viewed by the vast majority of people out there. We are literally the scum of the earth. We're just here to separate you from your money by any means necessary, whether that be the case or not. That's how we're thought of. And so to have a job where every day when you say hello to somebody, that's what they're thinking about you, that takes a huge toll on you emotionally and mentally. Um, it's just so. How do you decide every day that I'm going to get up and I'm going to convince people I'm not that person every day for 43 flipping years? Okay, I I was worn the hell out at the end of it because it takes twice as much effort and energy to deal honestly with people because they're fighting you every step of the way than it does to lie, cheat, and steal. It's easier to be who they think you are. It's
Yeah, and
harder to be the
it's always
opposite.
easy for these businesses to go after the quick buck too, and they're not trying to play the long game. Especially these salespeople. A lot of these salespeople. What's the average? Where's the average amount of time that a salesperson at one of these dealerships even stays there? You would know that more than I would.
It's not very long. I mean, the amount
Yeah.
of turnover is dramatic in the car business. I mean, you know, 200-300%. The key
What
is
do you think the big reason is? Is because it seems like going into the deal, like it feels like they have to fight at every corner for the sales and everything. Is that it, or is it so predatory that people just or get tired of doing that? Feels
um,
icky.
I know of a salesperson that works at a Lexus dealership in Arizona, and he has been there for 35 years. 35
That's
years.
that's rare.
Absolutely. Doesn't have to lie, doesn't have to cheat, doesn't have to steal. Okay, doesn't have to play any of the games that are associated with buying a car because he works for a dealership that understands the importance of being different and being fair and transparent with their customers than most dealerships, and that he has never had to work legitimately in the type of atmosphere where it's dog eat dog. So there are people out there that can make a nice living selling cars, doing it the right way, working for dealerships that do it the right way. The vast majority, however, are working for not so honorable dealerships. They don't get any real training. The sales management is suspect at best, and the amount of nepotism and favoritism that you see sales managers utilize with sales staff is enough to drive some good salespeople out of a dealership because they can be trying to do the right thing and the sales manager's busy rewarding those that are doing the wrong things. So yes, there's a poop ton of turnover. It is hard to get salespeople to stay. As I used to like to tell them, here's the real deal. The grass isn't any greener working at another dealership. The whole idea behind what you're doing is to build up a book of business so that you don't have to take fresh ups walking through the door anymore. You just service your own customers who call you and go, "Oh, Brandon, it's time for me to get another car." Or, my granddaughter just graduated high school. I'd like to get her a car. And you're not dealing with just people walking in off the street. You are just dealing entirely with appointments. And so the grass isn't greener. Stay where you are. Build your book of business. Become the exception, not the rule. Become the opposite of what people think car salespeople are, and stay in one place. And you can end up doing very, very nicely. But it's tough getting beat up every day. I can tell you that.
I've got a question for you. So, over the time that you were in the car industry, over the 40 years, are there a couple specific things that you can point out that got a lot more difficult from the first 10 years that you were doing it to the last 10 years that you were doing it?
Well, I think the internet has really changed things to a certain degree. I mean, let's face it. When I first started in the car business, that was before the Monroney labels had to be on trucks. There wasn't a window. It wasn't required. I mean, the price of a vehicle in many cases was based on the enthusiasm of the buyer, because there weren't window stickers. So from that perspective, things have changed. We live in an information age where so much information is available to you before you even enter into a dealership. Now, not enough people take advantage of all that information that's available to them. But so I think the crooks in the business find it harder to be crooks in the business today. And those of us who tried to play fair and square and do it right and improve the experience for customers, find it still difficult to deal with the crooks that are in the business. And the public is so used to dealing with crooks in the business that they think everybody is a crook in the business. And they're not. They're not all crooks.
Yeah, one thing I would say, the internet probably has allowed car dealers like me, car dealers who want to do the right thing and not charge crazy amounts, not do all these fees and everything. It probably has actually helped dealerships like ours, and that might be why we've been so successful over the years, is because we're able to literally post the price that we're going to sell the car for. And then an educated buyer can then call us and say, okay, what's your doc fee? What are the other fees that you're going to have? And obviously, we're going to say we have no doc. I mean, the car is $2,500 online. You're paying us $2,500 plus your whatever your government fees are, your taxes. Yeah. So I do think that the internet, and I remember when I was real young and first getting into it, my grandfather would talk to all of the old timers that were doing it too, and they were asking, like, even in my first year, I was selling a bunch of cars. And I'm like, how's he doing it? And my grandfather was like, well, he's doing everything on the computer. I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing it on the computer. And then I would just post stuff on like Craigslist. And then it's amazing, because 14 years ago, the internet was doing really well, but none of these car dealers were using the internet for anything. There were a couple of us, maybe guys that were just a little bit older than me when I was getting into it. But it's like the car market doesn't want to move to the future. They don't want to use the new technology. And it was amazing how many cars I could sell, even though I didn't have hardly any cars, just because I'd freaking post them online for a price.
Yeah, there's a lot of dealers that, they go, well, this is the way we've always done it. Doesn't mean it's the way it needs to be done. It's just the way you've always done it. If we want to go back to the way we've always done it, hell, I remember when I first started, if you needed a car loan, you would fill out a credit application at the dealership. I would then call the bank and talk to a credit buyer and read him the credit application. So he'd be sitting on the other end of the phone writing down what I was telling him that the customer had shared with me. When we got a bank approval, there wasn't a computer to spit out a bank contract. So if somebody was financing $15,589.62 at whatever the prevailing rate was at that time, I had a book. And I would open the book to whatever that rate was that we were using, and I would look up $15,000. And I'd have to write down all the charges and everything associated with that amount of money for that term. And then I'd have to look up $800, and I'd have to write down all those numbers. And then I'd have to look up $89, and then I'd have to look up the 62 cents. And then I'd have to add all that together and handwrite the damn contract. Okay? Handwrite it. And I had to make sure every penny was appropriately accounted for on that contract, or the bank would send it back to me and not pay us. So it was, today, it's like today you don't even oftentimes spit out a form, you sign it on an iPad. It's so, yeah, has the world changed? Should some of the things seem to be better for consumer? That should be, not necessarily, because F&I people figure out how to skew whatever it is they need to skew. The salespeople figure out how to hide. It's just, but it's changed. And if dealerships aren't willing to invest in current technology and future technologies, eventually they will go by the wayside. They will get bought out by somebody who will, because they will realize there's efficiencies associated with all this computerization. That saves you money.
Do you remember over your years any laws or regulations that got changed while you're in that made a massive impact, like overnight?
Well, yeah, the rules regarding disclosures on bank contracts. The top boxes in a bank contract that showed you how much money you put down, how long you were financing for, what the rate was, what the interest charge was, what the total cost of the car was when you added all that up. Those were all the top disclosures. They weren't there when I first started in the business. So, did we somehow get by with all that? Yeah, we figured out how you could disclose all that stuff. It was, there have been, the as is stickers that are on cars that are federally mandated for pre-owned cars to show if there's any factory warranty left, or if you're buying the car, I think it's called the FTC sticker, if I remember correctly. Those weren't there when I first started. I remember the Atlantic City Press suggested, when they said, "Can you come up with some ideas as to, like, an article we could write?" And I suggested we ought to spend a day with me at the dealership and see what it's like to actually have to try and sell cars to people. And we had just run a promotion. I think it was like $200 over invoice on our little Nissan pickup trucks, and we had done away with it, but it still said over invoice, didn't say how much. And I remember standing in front of these trucks, and it just said over invoice, and I remember saying to the reporter, I said, "That's right, we guarantee you're going to pay over invoice when you buy one of these trucks." Just the nonsense that was involved. Just, I remember they wrote an article, which the article was entitled, "It Takes Two to Make a Trustworthy Transaction." So if the customer's going to lie, then it's not going to be a trustworthy transaction. If the dealer is going to lie, then it's not going to be a trustworthy transaction. And I understood in the early 80s that it had to be a collaborative effort, not an adversarial effort, because we both had the same goal. The customer wanted to buy a car. I wanted to sell a damn car. Why fight about it? Let's figure out how to collaborate on it. And that was the whole gist of the thing. And I remember, I mean, I was drinking chamomile tea at that time to calm myself down. I was smoking like 3 packs of cigarettes a day, and the phone's ringing constantly. And the reporter said to me, she said, with all the noise, with all the smoke, she said, why don't you just get out of the car business? And I looked at her, I said, you could leave your wife, but you can never get out of the car business. Now, I was engaged to Zach's mother at that time. She saw that quote in the paper. She was ready to kill me.
No, I'm sure.
Yeah, but it's true. I mean, you know, once you get the car business in your blood, you'll give up your family before you'd give up the car business.
If they would have got another quote for you, then Zach might not be here today.
Exactly. Thank God that was the only quote.
So talking about like regulation and stuff, I think that's where we started with this, and I don't know how we got off topic. It's probably because you were talking, but I have one that really affected our business big time. It was back in 2018 and 2019, and this is just in North Carolina. And they dictate all the rules that I have to play by. Every state's completely different. So for this, your state might be different than what my state allows. But they made a law saying that used car dealers could now sell cars without having the title in their possession. That doubled my business overnight, because this capital that I had wrapped up in these cars, I had a lot of cars like in storage that I couldn't do anything with. They just sat there until I received the title. But all of a sudden, all of that was actually real inventory just overnight. And our business just skyrocketed right after that happened, because I could just turn around capital so quick. Yeah, we had some problems with some titles not coming in, and we had to fix it for the customers. And I lost money on those deals.
Tell us about how you sold a vehicle you didn't have the title for yet. Okay. The state gives you 45 or 60 days to register the vehicle. You're out of time because you still don't have the title of the car that you sold. Tell us about those stories.
Yeah, so you call the customer, and that was my role then. Luckily, I don't have to do that anymore because we still have the ability to do this. But I would call the customer, say, look, Mr. Jones, Miss Jones, whoever it is, I'm so sorry, but that car that I sold you, it is now a paperweight, and we're not going to be able to get that title for it. So what I would love to do is I would either love to give you your money back. You got to drive the car for a couple months, and you're not going to have to pay anything for it. Or you can come back here if you see something you like that's even a little bit more. I'll switch you out, and you don't have to pay any extra money or anything like that. And I've never really had an issue. I think there was like one customer that was like, no, I'm keeping this car. I want to keep it. And I just had to call him again and say, look, you're just not going to have a tag. I mean, you can keep driving as long as you want to, but I can never get that title. So you can come back here and I can try everything in my power to make it right for you. And I think really over the years, I mean, this has been 6-7 years since this has been in effect. I've only had really one real issue, but when I give them the option to come back in and switch out for something else, usually it's fine. Now I'm going to lose money, but I got to take care of the customer, and I would still have it that way to be able to roll so much more inventory so quickly. And I'll take the risk having to deal with those customer situations just because we're able to sell so many more cars because of that.
Yeah, you have to look at it and see which makes the most sense. And you go, well, you know, if we have one or two where we have an issue ultimately, but we sold 30 more cars, it's well worth it.
Yeah, and in a lot of states, it's not. I mean, I get it. I get that it's not the best thing for the consumer to be able to buy a car and the dealership not have a title. I understand that completely. Yeah. And a lot of other dealerships are not going to handle it the same way that I do, where we are going to do everything in our power to make the customer happy and make sure that they get a benefit from us not getting this title in.
Exactly.
But most dealerships, all they legally in our laws, it says that we have to inform them that we're not getting this title, and the sale is then void. So literally, that's all we have to do legally.
Wow.
Is just say, okay, give us the car back and the sale's done.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so all of you watching it here, I know most of you are not subscribed, so I need you to hit that subscribe button. Whatever we need to do to get you to hit that subscribe button, Ray will do it. So just hit it for us and let us know what he needs to do down in the comments to get you to subscribe.